After Disney's retelling of Snow White in 1937, Walt knew what story he'd like to tackle next. Carlo Colletti's Pinocchio. Colletti's version originated in 1881 and was a weekly serial for Italy's Giornale dei Bambini, which translates newspaper for kids. You'd think, coming from a children's magazine, the story would be fantastically sweet. It was anything but. Carlo Colletti did not like kids, and he let them know it through the marionette's misadventures. In fact, Walt Disney tried to keep the dark tone in his own version in 1940, but eventually became so fed up with the story that he restarted production halfway through it just to soften it up. What exactly did he find so horrible? We're here to tell you. Hi, my name is Frank James Bailey with Channel Frederator, and today we're going over some of Disney's dark secrets in Pinocchio. And no, you won't see any growing noses here. Trust us. It's no longer a surprise why "I've got no strings on me" sounded so creepy in Marvel's Age of Ultron. Bratty Pinocchio. The most striking difference between the two versions is Pinocchio's personality. Before he was the sweet, naive young boy we've all come to love in the Disney film, Pinocchio was a cruel and malicious brat in the original. In this version, we meet Pinocchio while he's still just a piece of wood. He frightens a carpenter named Mastro Cherry upon asking not to be turned into a table leg. Enter Geppetto. This kindly old man isn't as kind as we remember him from the film. Instead, he's quick to anger. He informs Cherry that he dreams of making a great marionette, and after a few hot-headed brawls with his friend, the carpenter happily gives Geppetto the piece of pine wood that nearly gave him a heart attack moments earlier. In a kinder story, Pinocchio would probably bestow a gift of granite to his father for crafting the puppet's body. But this isn't a kind story. Pinocchio steals Geppetto's wig immediately after giving him arms, kicks him after getting legs, and runs out of the house after Geppetto teaches him to walk. He may not have been Kid of the Year in the film, but at least he was polite. To make matters worse, Geppetto catches the puppet by the throat in the original and is mistaken for a child abuser and thrown in jail. Pinocchio feels no remorse over this. He's just happy that he's now home alone, free to behave however he wants. Of course, that's when he meets Jiminy Cricket, or rather, just simply the talking cricket in Colletti's version. In fact, besides not having a name, he wasn't even a main character. Rather than breaking into Geppetto's home for warmth, like in the Disney film, the talking cricket lived in the old man's house for thousands of years. He scolds Pinocchio for mistreating his own father and warns him that those who only care about having fun always end up in the hospital or in prison. Spoiler alert, this is one wise cricket. Unfortunately, that doesn't help him. Pinocchio doesn't like being scolded, so he grabs a hammer and smashes the cricket to death. Ugh, gruesome. So much for living another 1,000 years. Disney's version of Pinocchio was definitely much kinder, since he just smiles at Jimmy and innocently asks him if he's his conscience. In a way, the cricket does function as a metaphorical conscience. No one assigned him the role, as a blue fairy does in the film adaptation, but he is the first person to give Pinocchio advice. Although the marionette feels no remorse for killing the cricket at first, it definitely haunts him later. Small-scale punishments. Italy's economy in the late 1800s wasn't the best. While not explicitly stated in Disney's version, we do pick up on it through Jiminy's 1,000-plus-year squatting at the beginning. So it isn't surprising that Geppetto was poor in both versions. With no food or parent at home, Pinocchio starves. He begs for food out during a thunderstorm, but a man mistakes him for a prankster and dumps cold water over him. Still hungry and now cold, Pinocchio heads home to warm up and rest his feet against the stove, and since he's made of wood, his feet burn off. Luckily, Geppetto returns the next morning. Even though Pinocchio wronged him, he still makes him new feet. Plus, he gives him his own food. Now that's a good dad. Thankful, Pinocchio promises to go to school. To encourage this, Geppetto sells his only coat to buy the puppet an ABC book, which we don't see him do in Disney's movie. On his way to school, however, Pinocchio notices something way more fun, the Marionette Theater, but it costs 4 pennies to get in. So what does the wooden boy do? He sells his ABC book to get in. While the puppets in Disney's version were lifeless, they're alive in Colletti's tale. They're happy to see Pinocchio, halting the show to say hello. The scary-looking director, known as Fire Eater, is not happy that his show stopped and threatens to burn Pinocchio and use the flaming wood to cook his dinner. After Pinocchio begs for his life, Fire Eater feels sorry for him. He'll go hungry tonight. Turns out Fire Eater isn't as mean as Disney's theater director, who locked Pinocchio in a bird cage. He even gives Pinocchio 5 golden coins to help Geppetto upon saying goodbye to the puppet. And then Pinocchio meets Fox and Cat, the golden coins. These next segments were almost entirely left out of Disney's version. While the film borrowed the characters of Fox and Cat, turning them into honest John and Gideon, it didn't show their cruelest side. Sure, they're still the same con artist Pinocchio mistakes as friends, but they do so much more than leading Pinocchio astray. Just to illustrate how horrible this duo truly was, Cat eats a blackbird who warns Pinocchio about him. Cat then explains he killed him to teach him a lesson. Right, cause that logic checks out. Learning that Pinocchio has 5 gold coins, Fox and Cat suggest that he'd get much more by burying the pieces in the Field of Wonders, where it will grow into a tree full of gold pieces. Convinced, Pinocchio follows them to the Inn of the Red Lobster. Oh, no relation to the tasty, buttery garlic biscuit peddling chain. They eat and sleep, but the duo scrams at midnight to make Pinocchio pay for their food and lodging. In on the deal, the innkeeper tells Pinocchio that Fox and Cat will meet them at the field later. On his way, Pinocchio runs into the ghost of the talking cricket. He tells the puppet to go home, but Pinocchio ignores him yet again. Before disappearing, the cricket prays that the puppet will safely evade the assassins. Wait, assassins? Yes, assassins. And so Pinocchio runs into the assassins, who are actually Fox and Cat in disguise. Quickly, Pinocchio hides the gold under his tongue. They try to pry Pinocchio's mouth open to get his coins, causing Pinocchio to bite off Cat's paw. The puppet flees, but his assassins give chase, willing to kill him to get the gold. Upon catching him, they stab him with sharp knives. Luckily, Pinocchio's wood shatters the blades. The assassins come up with a new plan. They'll just hang him. Thus, Collodi's ultimate punishment was death. It takes days for Pinocchio to die. Collodi gets quite detailed about it. For example, each blow of wind slowly tightens the noose around the puppet's neck, making it harder to breathe, until Pinocchio becomes limp and dead. The end. Alright, I'm done. Well, not really. Collodi wanted the story to conclude here, but because his young readers were so mortified, his bosses urged him to resume the story and give it a happier ending. The author agreed on one condition. He'll bring Pinocchio back as long as his punishments were more gruesome. The girl with azure hair. So, before death, while fleeing from the assassins, Pinocchio came upon a small cottage and asked a maiden with azure hair, that's bright blue, to hide him inside. She told him she's dead, so she can't let him in. Lovely. This is the character Disney turned into his gentle blue fairy, right? Yes, it is. Just checking. Collodi decided to use this character to resume his tale post-death. The maiden becomes sad to see Pinocchio hanging and asks her animal doctors to help Pinocchio, and he regains consciousness. Pinocchio lies about losing the gold coins, and his nose grows. Terrified, he begs for it to go back to normal, and Azure Hair summons woodpeckers to peck it away. Pretty brutal when you think about it. She tells him she's called for Geppetto to come live with them together as a family. Pinocchio rushes out, wanting to meet his father on the path, but things do not go well. Here we go again. The punishments get worse. These scenes were all, understandably, cut out of the Disney story. But at this point in the original tale, the puppet runs into Fox and Cat again. Not aware they were his assassins, they finally get Pinocchio to plant his coins in the Field of Wonders. And, of course, Pinocchio gets back zilch. He tells a simple judge that he's been robbed, and they throw Pinocchio in jail for having been a victim of a crime for 4 agonizing months. Upon release, Pinocchio eats a farmer's crop. The farmer punishes Pinocchio by making him his new watchdog, putting him in a painfully heavy collar. When chicken-thieving weasels try to strike a deal with Pinocchio, he finally does something right. He turns them in. Grateful, the farmer emancipates Pinocchio, who rushes back to Azure Hair's cottage. What he finds isn't good. A pigeon tells him that the maiden died. Don't worry, she inexplicably comes back post-mortem quite a few times, from grief due to Pinocchio's long absence. What's more, Pinocchio hears that Geppetto is setting out to sea to continue his search for his wooden son. Pinocchio rushes to the seaside, where he finds Geppetto drowning. The marionette tries to save him, but it's no use. Geppetto falls under. Pinocchio learns that the terrible shark has probably swallowed Geppetto. Yes, MONSTRO isn't a whale like in the film, but a shark. After swimming for quite some time to search for his father, Pinocchio grows hungry and thirsty. Eventually, Pinocchio decides to help an older woman carry jugs of water, only to learn it's Azure Hair grown up. Oh, and she's finally called the Blue Fairy. Dreamed to be a real boy. Pinocchio asks why the Blue Fairy grew up so fast. He wants to grow up too, but marionettes can't grow. Whereas Pinocchio wanted to become a real boy from the start of Disney's film, only now does he dream for it in the original. The fairy tells him that she'll grant his wish if he obeys her always and does what she wishes. Oh, good thing Fairy only wants Pinocchio to go to school, which is something we never see happen in Disney's version, as Walt's story just fast forwards from the Marionette Theater to Pleasure Island and skips everything in between. Even though Pinocchio proves he can be a good student, he befriends well-known rascals. To distract him from studying, Pinocchio's friends trick him into skipping school. The puppet realizes they're sham, and a fight breaks out. One boy accidentally strikes another with Pinocchio's back. Scared that their friend is dead, the boy runs away. Then, carabiners pass by and blame Pinocchio for the boy's fatal injury. They try to kidnap Pinocchio, but he flees by running into the sea. A fisherman catches him and believes Pinocchio is a rare fish and prepares to cook him. But a dog that Pinocchio saved earlier from drowning rescues him, and Pinocchio promptly heads home to the Blue Fairy. She tells him that tomorrow they'll hold a ceremony to turn him into a real boy. Too bad things turned for the worst. Oh yeah. This wasn't the worst part. The Land of Toys. Pinocchio goes to invite his friends to the ceremony. He finds Lampwick, the laziest boy and the biggest mischief maker in school, waiting to leave for the Land of Toys, a place of enjoyment, only with no responsibilities or school. Lampwick coaches Pinocchio into coming, and a little fat man offers him a ride there. As Pinocchio rides one of the donkeys, whose ears were bitten off by the little man, he hears a warning about the Land of Toys, otherwise known as Pleasure Island in the film, and notices the animal is weeping. Gee, I wonder why. Still, Pinocchio enjoys Funland for 5 months. In a way, Disney altered this section the least. Boys do whatever they want, creating utter pandemonium. Then they contract jackass fever, which turns them into donkeys. Pinocchio's ears turn donkey-iffy, and he watches in horror as Lampwick transforms into a jackass. However, unlike Disney's version, Pinocchio doesn't escape. He also becomes a full-on donkey. And because he never becomes a donkey in the Disney version, we never learn what happens to the boys who undergo the transformation. They're sold to different owners, whom they have to work for as donkeys for the rest of their lives. The little man sells Pinocchio to a circus, where he's mistreated and whipped. After Pinocchio hurts his leg during a performance, his owner sells him to a man who wants to skin Pinocchio to make a drum. He ties a rope attached to a heavy stone around Pinocchio's neck and legs, and pushes him into the sea to drown him. Don't worry, fish swarm around Pinocchio and feast upon his flesh, revealing the marionette inside the donkey's body. After pulling him back up, the man's angry to find a puppet and threatens to sell Pinocchio as firewood. Thus, Pinocchio dives into the sea to escape, where he meets MONSTRO. Again, MONSTRO isn't a whale, as depicted in the movie. He's a ginormous shark in this version, with no name. After he swallows Pinocchio, the puppet meets a fish named Turney. Turney is a pessimist, telling Pinocchio that they'll die during digestion. But Pinocchio refuses to believe that. He goes toward a light at the other end of the stomach and finds Geppetto with a candlestick. Geppetto has been trapped in the shark's stomach for 2 years, surviving off supplies of a ship that the shark swallowed whole. However, the supplies have finally run out, and he's accepted his inevitable death. Pinocchio has an idea. They're going to escape. But instead of lighting a fire to make the shark sneeze, as we see in the film, Pinocchio suggests that they just walk out. You see, the shark was old and suffered from insomnia, so he sleeps with his mouth open, leaving a perfect window of opportunity to escape. They just need to tiptoe on his tongue as to not wake the beast. After 2 tries, they make it over the teeth, and then the shark sneezes in its sleep, sending Pinocchio and Geppetto far away from it. Geppetto can't swim, so Pinocchio carries him on his back. Pinocchio struggles, but Turney helps him to shore as a thanks for Pinocchio, showing him that it was possible to escape. And that's it. No angry chase, as depicted in Disney's retelling. It's actually quite tame in comparison, for once. Becoming a real boy. Pinocchio helps a weak Geppetto walk as they look for shelter. Along the way, they run into Fox and Cat, who Pinocchio finally ignores. They find a small home that is owned by the talking cricket, who is inexplicably alive now. He tells Pinocchio that the blue goat gave him the home. Yeah, Blue Fairy was a goat for a while in this version, and that she was distraught that Pinocchio abandoned her, which only saddens Pinocchio. Pinocchio takes care of his father by working on a farm for 5 months, where he finds a dying lampwick. He also learns to make baskets and sells them for cash, and he makes Geppetto a wheelchair. After making enough cash, the puppet goes to buy new clothes, but learns that his fairy is ill. Instead of buying clothing, he gives Fairy money to help her. Pinocchio dreams that Fairy forgives him and tells him to keep behaving. That morning, Pinocchio wakes up as a real boy, in a beautiful room with new clothes. He finds a note from Fairy, gratefully returning his 50 pennies as 50 gold coins. And suddenly, younger Geppetto tells Pinocchio that the change is thanks to him. And there we have it, the contractual happy ending Collodi agreed to. Pinocchio sees his own lifeless marionette body at the end, because he doesn't just transform into a real boy like the Disney version, he gets an entirely new human body. And that visual's kind of morbid, but still a happy ending. The moral. Collodi definitely intended for the story to have a message. Nearly every chapter was to the point, leading itself to the lesson. If you're a troublesome kid, very bad things will happen to you. So listen to your parents if you value your life. Basically, Pinocchio was a warning that scared kids into being on their best behavior. The Disney film also had a thematic lesson, but it's not as cutthroat. From the get-go, Jiminy Cricket tells us Disney's moral. When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are. Anything your heart desires will come to you. It's encouraging, hopeful, and embodies the overall Disney spirit. Plus, there's no way that something which starts off with "when you wish upon a star" could be gruesome, right? Perhaps that's why every Disney film begins with the familiar medley. Still, both encouraged kids to behave, just in different ways. Disney pushed towards the belief that good things come to good children, while Collodi focused on the negative idea that bad things come to bad children. Even then, Disney definitely scared children with his take on the MONSTRO, and how, Pinocchio basically drowns at the end. At least, he wasn't hanged. And there you have it. My name is Frank, and thanks for watching Disney's Dark Secrets for the brutal truth behind Pinocchio. Did we miss any secrets? Tell us your thoughts in the comment section below, and check out our other videos. Don't forget to subscribe to channel Frederator, and click on the bell icon to become part of our notification squad. Frederator loves you.